Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast with your host, Charles Kiriakou. I'm delighted to be joined by Michelle Flynn, who is a certified health and performance coach. And I've had the pleasure of working with Michelle quite a few times, actually. So, Michelle, firstly, how's things going?
Hi, it's going very well, thank you. Although I've just come back from a yoga retreat in Italy, so it's easy to say things are going well after that.
I'm a bit jealous, to be honest with you. I feel like I need to go on a retreat after being completely flat out for the last 4 weeks. But do you know what? I'm so excited because some of the topics we're going to speak about in this show, where I'm at mentally in my life right now, I feel like I'm going to get so much value out of this. But before we talk about the topics, Michelle, for people that don't know who you are and what your background is, your story, etc., why don't you just introduce yourself and give us a bit of a backstory?
Okay, so firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to come along. Probably like many people listening to this, I fell into recruitment. So in 97, I graduated. I spent a year sort of faffing around afterwards, having fun in Bristol where I studied, and then realised that I needed to go and get a proper job. And I was like, well, what does that look like? And fell into recruitment when they told me how much money you could make in your first year. So I joined Computer Futures. I was put into the perm team, which was very much suited to me. And I stayed there for over 8 years, working kind of as one of their top performers. So absolutely loved it. Very, very tough, but very good training ground. So to this day, still things that I do and ways that I work have very much come from that kind of grounding. I then hit 30, decided to go traveling. That was brilliant. And then came back and went and joined a Microsoft Gold partner with the aim of basically helping them scale to exit. So I hired them 500 people and then they sold to a big American company. And I carried on working there for a little bit, but didn't actually want to work for a really large company. So they asked if I wanted to set up a recruitment business and they'd be my first client. I was like, yes, please. That sounds great. So I did that. And then I started to take on other clients and eventually stopped working with EMC and focused on tech startups in London, very much in the sort of software development space around .NET, and loved it. Was doing that, sort of had no plans to do anything different until one morning I woke up and literally hit the floor. I had a really severe pain on the left side of my chest. I got rushed to hospital. It wasn't a heart attack, thank God. And so I ignored it. And then for 3 years, it just wasn't right. I was tired. I was gaining weight. My memory was rubbish. And now, in hindsight, if I look back, that was probably partly related to being female of a certain age. But also, there was just sort of a lot going on. And then I collapsed again 3 years after the first collapse and realized, I should do something about this. So I started working with a health coach. And she talked to me about stress and what stress does to the body. And it was like this bang moment. So then I decided to study and then somehow just ended up, I hadn't planned to be a coach, but people were asking for help because I was different. And then it got to the point where I had to sort of make the choice, still do my recruitment business or move to coaching. And I've been doing coaching full time now for about the last 4.5 years, mainly working with recruiters because I get it. I get the challenges and I talk the recruiter speak that we know.
Love it, love it. Well, you know what? I think with your background, Michelle, and you look, I've worked with you before. You've come in and done workshops, and you've helped my wife out as well. I think there's going to be a lot of recruiters that want to be extremely successful, right? A lot of people get into recruitment because they see the dollar bills, right? They know they can make a lot of money. But I've been in a similar situation where I had tonsillitis like every single month. I think it was for like 9 months, and it was simply because I was working 24 hours a day. Basically, I was doing nursing recruitments, was constantly on call, and I had no idea back then what stress was. I had no idea what burnout was. I just was so focused on being high performing. So yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. So a bit of a sort of outline as to what we're going to talk about for the listeners then. We're going to talk about what the high performing leaders are doing and what the high performing consultants and what the high performing businesses are doing. We're going to talk about how to create a high performing mindset and culture, but a sustainable one, which I think is so important. And I'm really, really interested to dive into that. And we'll talk through some things around how to prevent burnout. And we'll have a bit of a conversation about something that could be deemed a little bit controversial, but we'll get there a little bit later. But tell me then, you obviously been self-employed for some time now, and you work with high-performing leaders and consultants and stuff. I guess the biggest flat out open question I can ask you is, what are they doing to be high performing?
What are they doing? Yes, it's interesting because where we're at the moment in the recruitment world, it has been a really, really tough few years. Probably the toughest I've seen in the whole kind of 25 years that I've been working in the industry. And where I work with the leaders and with their teams, you're getting to see kind of what the challenges are at both sides. Um, and if you kind of go, well, what are the ones doing that are performing? I guess to a certain point, there isn't just one silver bullet. It's a variety of different things, and it's people kind of picking and choosing the ones that suit those. But it really is about sort of focusing. It's the oxygen mask on yourself first. If you are not looking after yourself, if you are burning yourself, if you are working crazy long hours, if you're doing US hours, which then could mean that you are eating really late, you're not getting really good sleep, then you're not going to perform at your best. So, really, the people that are doing really well have realized the connection between personal and professional. And like in my day, in the sort of the late 90s, it was separate. It was like, no, work is work and life is life, and they don't ever cross, which was so ironic because it crossed all the time. We were all great mates and we saw each other out of work. But when you actually realize that it does overlap, and that it doesn't have to be going to the gym at 5 o'clock every morning and kind of the whole 5 a.m. club, but that might work for somebody. But depends on if someone's got kids or not. But actually realizing that you have to look after your health. And when you look after your health, when you are sleeping, when you are eating decent food, when you are not just drowning the sorrows of the day with sort of 4 bottles of wine, you're going to perform better. And I think you've got to think about it like athletes. We're the athletes of kind of the recruitment world. And what do athletes do? They focus on health because without that, they can't be amazing athletes. And we've seen that a lot at the Olympics this year with Simone Biles and her story, and sort of so many of the athletes talking about when they were having mental health struggles, they couldn't perform. And when they were looking after themselves and prioritizing themselves, look, they were winning gold medals. So, kind of prioritize yourself, and put those good habits in, but know that they have to adapt because one person might like running, for someone else they might hate that and they just might want to sort of take the dog for a walk or play paddle tennis.
Yeah, there's something I want to unpick just what you said there about like the running thing, because I it's so Marmite with me. I love it, but I hate it. And I done a run a couple of days ago, and I set myself a goal. You can see my whiteboard behind me. I set myself. I've got like exercise goals, life goals, and business goals. Right, I break it down into three things, and then I do it for the month. I do it for the year, do it for the quarter, and do it for the week. And this week I set myself a goal to just go and do one 5, and my monthly target was to basically get 24 under 26 minute 5k, which is not too fast for me. Like, it's okay, right? I smashed that this week, but I have to say, from minute 1 to minute 24, I hated every second of it. I was blowing out my backside, right? It was rough. But I think that there's something in that, to, if you're a consultant or a business leader listening to this, doing things that you don't like can help. But equally, if you're, because I want to ask you about habits in a second, if you want to build a habit for high performance, and we're talking about health for a minute, if you're going to come out and do a 5k like I done, where your heart rate is 170 beats per minute for 24 minutes, you're probably never going to want to do that ever again, right? That's probably going to not allow you to then form that as a habit. So yeah, basically, firstly, I want to ask you about what your thoughts are on doing things that you don't like to then help you get high performing, and then we'll talk about habits.
It is good to do things that you don't like and to step out of your comfort zone and to try different things. And I hate running. I'm terrible at it. I've only ever got under 30 minutes once. I'm now back up to about 36 minutes. Um, Anyone who's seen my LinkedIn will know that I post when I'm running and then I stop and just have a chat with LinkedIn as an excuse to stop. Whereas kind of like my husband loves it and he ultra runs and he ran around the whole of England. So I think it is good to push yourself and challenge yourself, but also if you're trying to build a habit of exercise, if you hate running, pick a different exercise. Like for me, exercise should be a hobby or it should be something that you do with people that you like. So I go to the gym. I hate the gym, so I go to classes. I don't really like the classes, but there's a great bunch of people there and we just have lots of fun doing it. So um, I do think it is good to challenge yourself. And in recruitment, you're going to feel uncomfortable all of the time. So you might as well, it's in CBT, it's called exposure therapy, which is if you're scared of something, you've got fear, you have to expose yourself to it to realize that actually you'll be okay. So it's kind of a bit the same with that when it's in recruitment, is that if you don't want to pick that phone up, you've got to pick the phone up. If you don't want to kind of close the candidate, you got to close the candidate, because that's how
Mm.
you're going to learn that you're going to be all right. And if you mess it up, what did you learn? And don't mess it up next time.
You're absolutely right. It reminds me a lot because I've done martial arts for like 15 years, and we always see people join the Thai boxing gym, and they're like, "That was amazing. That was so good." They spent half the class learning how to throw punches, and the other half just doing their footwork. Then they come back for the second class, and they're like, they bought some brand new boxing gloves. They're like, "This is their new class, like their new hobby." Then they spar against someone who's got a lot of experience, and then they don't hit them once, and they get hit in the face 5 times, and they're like, "I hate this. I'm never coming back ever again." Do you know what I mean? So it's like there's that fine balance, isn't there, between if you're a listener listening to this and you're like, right, I need to get my life in order, I need to become a little bit healthier. Maybe don't take my approach, because my approach to exercise is I like doing things that I despise. Like, I go to a CrossFit class because I hate it. I'm terrible at it. I run because it sucks, and I hate doing it, but it calcifies my brain and it makes me strong and it makes me able to get through things. But if I've not worked out for 2 weeks because I've been in Portugal, drinking wine and eating loads of food, I'm not going to go and run, because that's something. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I will go and do something like some kettlebell swings or something that I find enjoyable. I've got a boxing bag in the gym, which, by the way, shout out to you, because you were the one that told me to go and get that in lockdown. And if you remember that, but like, that's my comfort sort of exercise. So that will get me in the flow to build up a bit of momentum. So yeah.
Brilliant. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it is fun when you step out of that comfort zone into like the stretch or the panic zone. It's like the adrenaline races and you feel uncomfortable, but they kind of say nothing grows in the comfort zone, which is true. Um, but I think it is that if you're trying to build something that is a regular habit, if you hate it after a while, you're probably not going to do it.
Yeah.
But that's about understanding what your own personality type is. And we've got kind of,
Mm.
there's a lady called Gretchen Rubin, and she does the 4 tendencies. Like, you can find it on, if you Google it, and it's, are you internally driven? Are you externally driven? Are you the questioner? So if I'm coaching a questioner, they want a lot of information that I need to give them all the data as to why they should do something. Or are you the rebel? And the rebel has to think it's their idea. So it's that kind of like, what is your type in terms of your motivation, and then pick something that works with that. Because if you're externally motivated, you might need a personal trainer. If you are internally motivated, you can probably get yourself out for a run on a cold, wet morning because you're self-driven that way. So reflect on yourself and see what works, really.
I love that. I'm going to look into that after this. So if you can, just send me a message, because by the time I'm trying to think of other questions, I'll just forget about it. But the last thing that you said there about the rebel, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, one of my best friends is exactly that person. So whenever if he's like learning to drive or he's trying to get a new job, he always has to think it's his idea. So if we give him the answer, he's just like, I'll think about it. And he just won't action it. And then sometimes when we meet up with him, and then we'll just basically say, like, have you thought about this? I swear you said something about this. And he was like, yeah, no, I did. And then he thinks it's his idea and then he actions it. So yeah, that's really, really fascinating. Really, really fascinating. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah, I'll
So
send you.
what would you say then? So, because obviously I work solely with recruitment businesses, right? A lot of recruitment businesses these days want to be high performing. Not all of them. I've worked with some recruitment businesses that kind of, they want to be above average, but they're not really necessarily, they don't want to work stupid hours and do millions, right? But for a recruitment business owner that's listening now, or someone that wants to set up their own business and they want to have that high performing culture or that high performance business, what would you say are maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 things that you could offer as value to say, look, these are some things that you need to do to become high performing?
Well, the first thing is hire the right people. Um, we all know that there are people in recruitment that probably shouldn't be. They don't want to be. It's not for them. They're not motivated in the same ways. And that's absolutely fine. Like, if you've fallen into it you've graduated and you're like, oh, well, that's just what I do, or oh, my mate's earning loads of money, and then realize it's not for you. Okay. So when you are hiring into your team as a leader, what are the values of that person? What's the real reason people want to do it? Um, and can you kind of see that they've got that kind of that same spark, or are you just hiring them like because they've got the beer fit, as in, oh, would you like to go for a beer with them? So I think the first thing is, if you want to build that culture, you need to build it with the right people. The second thing is, and I think this is really important, and I think that there's a real tendency to kind of talk about younger generations as, oh, well, they're lazy. They're not lazy. They want to be inspired the same way as you did, Charles, when you came into recruitment, and I did when I joined Computer Futures. I was inspired every day by Daley Thompson and Lucy Gilmore and everyone else that was around me to just want to be brilliant. I didn't think about the hours because I was working sort of in an environment that was high performing. I could see that there was a lot of money to be made. And I just wanted that. And I was given the right skills. So if you're hiring people who haven't done recruitment before and expecting them to just pick up the phone and know what they're doing, that's not going to happen. And that's where sort of the work that you're doing, Charles, and sort of other people within the industry. But it's like, train your people, make sure they've got the skills to be high performing. Because if you've got the wrong people and you don't train them, you're probably not going to get to where you want. But then I think also about, what do you want that to look like? What are the kind of the rules around what time you're expecting people to check their phones? People are getting burnt out, and I know we're going to sort of go into that, but because of the fact that they are feeling like they've got to be online all the time. And then there was a chap I've been working with recently, and he put this out on LinkedIn, the work we'd been doing around his sleep. Within 1 week of him getting off the phone at 8:30 at night, his sleep quality had gone from like 9% up to 21% in 1 week. And you're like,
Wow.
that means he's going to do better at work. He's going to be higher performing. So I think it's that combination, but really it's also practicing what you preach. It's sort of, if all
Mm.
your newbies see that you're sitting, eating at your desk at lunch, they're going to think they have to do that. If they are getting messages from you at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're thinking they're going to have to reply. So creating sort of a space that is high performing, but also that is kind of being realistic that we're all just humans, and there is a point where if we push too hard, we're going to collapse.
Yeah. Honestly, I agree with everything you just said there. Well, one thing that's I guess a challenge for me when I go into recruitment businesses when they've got pre-existing people they've hired is exactly what you said. And I don't think I've actually ever heard the term beer fit, but it's, it's a thing, unfortunately, in recruitment where, can I go for a beer with this person? And I remember once I wanted to hire someone and they didn't drink alcohol and they were quite entrepreneurial. He was a bit weird, I'll be honest. He was very weird. In hindsight, he was very weird. But
It wasn't weird because you
immediately,
didn't drink alcohol.
no, no, no. It wasn't because of that. He was. I just remember we had him for drinks in the office. Obviously, he wasn't drinking, so people thought that was weird. But then two people asked him what sport or what music he's into or what film, and he says, "I don't listen to music. I don't watch movies or TV, and I don't watch sport." And I was like, "Whoa, okay. Like you're just not going to get on with anyone in the office." Yeah, I know. It's very interesting. But anyway, but immediately a lot of people were just like not going to be a culture fit because they don't drink, and I see and I hear that, and I've always been quite conscious about my health, and I've been teased. And look, I'm an adult now. I can kind of get over it. But I've been teased so many times when people are just like, "You're so boring, Charles. Just come for a beer." But the problem is if I go for a beer and then I have an awful sleep and I've got to load on tomorrow, it's just not worth it for me. It really isn't. And look, listen, these days I keep having beers and going out and all the rest of it to like special occasions. Like when I signed up a new client 4 or 5 months ago, we went out for beers on a Thursday and I went out with the clients and we were out until like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that for me, I came home, I woke up the next day, felt like absolute garbage. But you know what? I had fantastic time. I had great stories and I properly bonded with my new client and I'm still working with them now. But I think when you hear about consultants and businesses doing this all the time, and that's all the incentives are all around booze and obviously it goes on to other things as well, which we'll talk about. Yeah, it's very frustrating. Before we move on to the next topic, though, I want to ask you a question about this because this is something that I got I don't want to say obsessed with, but I became like really hyper fixated on just the world of habits, right? So you probably read the Atomic Habits book, right? So that for me, I read that book when I was in Cyprus the year before I got married, so it would have been 2022. And I'm a slow reader, right? I've got ADHD, so I'll be reading, and if I'm not medicated and there's a kid playing in the pool, my brain will just go everywhere, right? And I know a lot of listeners listening to this will go, yeah, that's me as well. But we talk about like being a high performing leader, being a high performance consultant, and you've given us a lot of value already about what to do to become high performing. But I really firmly believe it is a lot. It's revolved a lot around habits. What's your advice, or what can you speak on around helping people and businesses to actually build really, really good habits?
Yeah, and absolutely. I love James Clear's work. I think he's brilliant. And anyone who hasn't signed up to his newsletter, go to jamesclear.com and he sends a brilliant newsletter out. It's all about habits. Habits are the solution to problems that we have. And 40% of our day is spent doing habits. And whether that is the habit of walking into the building and knowing what button to press to get to the lift to the floor that you want, that solves the problem of getting up to the office. So I think it's really key, but it's also knowing why you're trying to build that particular habit. So if someone is trying to build the habit of exercising, but they don't really want to build that habit, they haven't got a strong enough driver, they're probably not going to build it. Or if someone's trying to break the habit, I was coaching one guy and he wanted to give up smoking. And he said to me, Michelle, I've tried everything. I've done everything. I've read the Alan Carr book. I've had the hypnotherapy. Nothing's worked. And I'm thinking, well, I know I'm good, but I'm not a magician. And I was like, okay, why do you want to give up smoking? And he just paused. And it was the first time it had actually hit home that he didn't actually want to give up. So I was like, you're not going to give up then. So when I'm working with people on habits, it's sort of, firstly, I do a workshop on it, like an hour session, which is all around the James Clear stuff. But it is that kind of going, what are the habits you want to build? How do we make them so small and so simple? Don't tell me you're going to go to the gym 5 times a week. Don't tell me that you're going to go from making 5 calls a day to making 100 calls a day. That's not how that's going to work. What's something that is achievable that you're going to feel sort of pleased about? There's another book, Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. Very similar idea, but it's like sort of, if you want to start flossing your teeth, just start with one tooth. And then you might do the second, and then you're like, oh, well, I'm here now. Like they do it, sort of the Tour de France cyclists do this. When they've got to go out every day and cycle 70 miles in training, and they're like, oh, I don't want to. It's like, just go for 1 mile a day. But by the time you've got all your cycle kit on and you've got your bike out, you're probably going to do more. So I think it's sort of going, what are the habits? And we could look at it and go, is a habit the same as a KPI? How do we kind of connect those? Because I talk about personal KPIs as well as business ones. But really, that is about, what do we want to achieve every day? Why do we want to do it? And how are we going to do it? And then the final piece is, sometimes you need to be held accountable by your mate, your partner, your boss, your coach, whatever, that's then going to go, did you actually do it? And if not, why not? And then how do we adjust it? If you want to eat more vegetables, but have you found vegetables that you like? Or have you found an exercise that you like? Or if you need to make more BD calls, is it that you need to kind of prepare your list the day before so that you can just come and get yourself thrown into it? It's all those little things, but also just trying to do them all at once is quite overwhelming. So just start with one. What habit do you want to build? Once we've got that in, great, on to the next one.
Yeah, starting small, and understanding why you want to do something as well. What you said there about the giving up smoking, I've embarrassingly been vaping for 3 months, right?
Charles, what are
I
you
know
doing?
I know, I'm embarrassed by it myself, right? But now it's basically a crippling addiction, and I'm pretty sure a lot of recruiters listening to this will
Have
be
you
like,
got it
damn
there?
it, that's
Is
yes.
it? Show me it. Please tell me it's not one of
This
those little
is
pink ones. Oh, it is. Doing?
I know. Anyway, look, I'm being vulnerable here, all right? So hopefully people can
Sorry, I'm
appreciate me
laughing
being.
at your vulnerability.
You're such a good coach, Michelle. I feel great about myself.
Right? It's all about having some fun.
Well, the reason why I thought I'd mention it to you is because I back in the day, my mum's been a smoker, my dad's been a smoker, my brother, all my uncles, my grandfather, they were all chronic smokers, right? I never smoked cigarettes, and on nights out, I would poke a cigarette from someone, and then eventually I'd buy a pack of cigarettes. But because you can't smoke it in the office and stuff, and because they don't exactly make you feel great, they stink and all the rest of it, I never developed a habit of smoking, right? Until 3 years ago, on a night out, a friend said, "Let me buy you an elf bar," and it tasted of lychee ice. And I was like, this is the greatest thing ever, not realizing it's got nicotine in it. And now 3 years later, I'm addicted. Now, the reason why I wanted to mention this, because it ties into habits and giving up and stuff and healthy, sustainable habits, right? In January 2024, so yeah, this year, my wife and I had a 30th birthday on New Year's Eve, because that's when her birthday is, and mine's 7 days before that. And it went absolutely off. And obviously, vaping, drinking, all the rest of it. But obviously, I just set up a business, so I had no money. I was like minus 3K on two separate credit cards. I had no guaranteed credit clients coming in. So money for me was like the biggest thing. And also feeling that hungover, I had a 2-day hangover. It was rough. So I had such a why as to why I was giving up vaping. So I wrote up on my whiteboard behind me reasons why I'm giving up vaping. I've got no money. I need to save money. I've not really exercised since setting up the business, because as you know, when you set up a business, exercise kind of goes out the window for the first couple of months because you're preoccupied. And I was pretty great for 5 months. I wasn't vaping. My cardio was fantastic, all the rest of it. And then we had a personal tragedy, and I had to take a month off of work, and I'd gone out drinking. I bought one, and then next thing you know, I'm bang addicted again. So now I'm in a similar situation as to what your coaching client said to you, where my wife asked me earlier, when are you going to give up? And I was like, to be honest with you, I don't know, because I don't really feel like I want to right now. I enjoy it. My cardio is still really good. I've got the money for it. So I know I'm eventually going to have to. So what do you do in that situation?
To a certain extent, you're kind of like fighting against one. If you really don't want to do it, then sort of if we were working and that was something that you came to me, but you didn't really want to, then we'd probably have to work around it for you to then get to the point that goes, actually, your sort of your Thai boxing isn't as good as it could be. Or like one thing, sort of when I made some changes and I really wanted to stick to them, and I thought that I wouldn't. I basically went onto YouTube and watched loads of videos that were pretty gross about why that thing that I didn't want to do anymore was bad. And I would say I haven't done it since. So sometimes, like if you were to go and look at some really gross stuff about
Yeah,
vaping, which there must be stuff out there,
they're
but then it's the same as on the cigarette packets, the pictures. I remember when sort of I've said to people before, I've never smoked, but I'm like, surely that picture is enough. And they're like, well, I just think it won't happen to me. So it's like, okay, well, obviously you don't want to give it up enough. And at some point you may, or at some point you may not, or at some point you might be kind of given the pressure that your wife's like, Charles, I really don't want you to do it. But
mm,
I think given the year that you've had, I think you shouldn't beat yourself up on that. If that was a
yeah.
habit that you kind of got back into, given everything you went through, then sort of at some point you will decide
Mm.
to give it up again. And the good thing is, you know that you can do it.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And I think it's about timing, right? And when I joined the CrossFit gym, the owner said something to me where he basically done like an introduction to CrossFit, all the different exercises. It was all technique for like 50 minutes. And it wasn't really a workout. Then he put me through an awful 10-minute exercise workout, awful, to the point I was just blowing out my backside. I was like, this is awful. And I said to him, I was like, oh man, if I didn't vape so much, my cardio would be so good. And he sat there and said, look, just get yourself in the gym, come to CrossFit, continue eating healthy, all the rest of it. And when you're ready, you'll know you're ready and you'll be able to quit, but don't force it. And I remember looking at him, and that's kind of the opposite. My mind is a bit weird where I'm like, you got to force it, all the rest of it. But I think he's right. Sometimes it's just, it will eventually happen. But anyway, we could talk about that for ages. Um, we talked a lot about habits. We talked a lot about high performance. But I want to ask you some questions around how we create these habits that are sustainable. So how do we become high performing, but it's sustainable? Because like I said at the start of this show, I would say probably yesterday or today. I mentioned to my guest yesterday. In about a week or two, I've basically recorded 5 episodes with guests, 3 episodes solo, and I've booked in now 15 people in the space of 2 weeks. Whilst working on site with clients and doing all the rest of it, I'm doing all the editing myself. I remember waking up this morning and just like, when sometimes it's like, like that, and you're like, oh my god, I just felt so overwhelmed to the point where I've been paralyzed all day. I feel like I just can't do anything. So I've had to go out for a walk. I forced myself to go to the gym even though I didn't want to. I forced myself to eat healthy even though I just wanted a KFC. I'm at that position now, and I'm sure there are so many listeners that have either been in that position or are leading on to the position where they feel like they're either going to burn out or whatever. So talk to me through what your advice is for people that want to create these habits, want to be high performing, but doing it in a sustainable long-term way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we were obviously meant to film this a week and a half ago, and I had a whopping great cold sore. So I'd asked you if we could rearrange it. But that was my body saying to me, right, you're burnt out. I'd been working really hard, I've been on client site. And when I'm on client site, I might do 9, 10 coaching sessions back to back. And I was like that. I was getting home and just like lying on the floor and sort of saying to my husband, don't even try and speak to me. I got nothing
Mm.
left. And my body is like, hello, here's the cold sore. So then I was like, right. Fortunately, I was going away then to work at retreat. So that did help. But I think it is that we have to pay attention. But it's the little things. You said you went for the walk. Like, I live on the south coast. If I'm struggling, I'll go to the beach. And even if it is hailstorms, I will go to the beach. There was women in the sea this morning. It was freezing, but I just
Love that.
need that kind of moment. I've walked to it. I've got some daylight. I've got some fresh air. I've just had a bit of space. I can literally feel like my head cooling down, and then I come back ready to go again. And if you look at, there's loads of research around brain scans, and when we go back to back to back to back, what happens to our brain? And when we take little pauses and little breaks, our brain looks completely different. So it doesn't have to be going to the beach or going to the gym. It can literally be go and stand in the kitchen of your office and just make yourself a drink, whatever your drink of choice, but don't be on your phone. Because often I
Mm.
think the problem is the technology, all the Wi-Fi stuff that's going on, but like that where you've just been on a screen all day. When you're staring at a screen, you're not breathing properly. When you're not breathing properly, you've got no energy, you can't think straight. So I think that for people to feel, and this is where the kind of the leading from the front with bosses comes in, is that it's okay to take a break. Because when everyone used to smoke, the smoking was the break in the day. The smoking was the getting out, having a little bit of social, having a chat. Whereas now, less people smoking or not taking those breaks. And we're wondering why people are really struggling, getting completely overwhelmed, burnt out, and then, worst case, kind of collapsing on the floor.
Yeah. Well, my wife said to me earlier today, because I'm trying to get better at speaking openly about my feelings, but I'm a biological male, so I really struggle. Like, I don't know whether it's because of societal norms or whether it's just because of the way I've been brought up. But, I was always told as a kid to kind of internalize it, get on with it, be a man, etc. Right. And that's not necessarily the most healthy, sustainable approach for it. But I opened up to her today when I come back from the gym and just said, look, I genuinely feel like I'm doing everything for the business right now, and I'm the sole provider for the house or the rest of it. And she just said to me, she's like, don't do anything, just chill out. And I just, in my mind, I think it's because I've been in recruitment for so many years, and I'm sure so many listeners will understand what I'm saying now, that switching off and just not doing any work is just like, have I got anything urgent and important? Is there anyone that needs me right now? No. Why don't I just go out and just not do anything? In my mind, I'm like, no, you need to go, you need to think about your content, you need to be doing this. And I think and I've worked with so many recruiters where they're just sat there at their desk, like, and I'm like, mate, go outside, get some fresh air, maybe just take a day of annual leave to just go and like regenerate your brain. Do you know what I mean? And I think what you've just said there as well, Michelle, is something that I've been very conscious about recently. And I think too many, especially a lot of the youngsters that are on TikTok, right? God, that sounded really old the way I said that. The youngsters on
Right,
TikTok.
TikTokers.
I have my vices as well when it comes to social media, but that in itself, the human brain is not. We have not evolved to take in the amount of information. I heard something recently, and people can fact check me on this, but the amount of content people consume via Instagram, X, LinkedIn, TikTok, etc., is the equivalent of reading 130 newspapers per day. Like full blown,
Surprise.
every single page. Think about that for a second. What does that do to our brains?
Yeah. It is that. And then we're sort of struggling to actually get our day jobs done because we're not sleeping properly because of all of that, or because sort of it's hard to, like, I struggle now with like reading books because I'm so used to just like the 140 characters that sort of Twitter used to be when it first started. And our brains can't catch up with it all, and we're seeing it with people. There's something called highly sensitive people, and it's basically when your nervous system is on high alert all of the time, and when that's on, that leads to health issues, feelings of anxiety, all sorts of different things. And it's just because we are literally like constantly going, oh my god, what's coming next? Oh, okay, the presidential debate's gone on, right? Okay, and what's going on? It's just too much. And I got on the train one night. I was coming back from London and I had been just full on all day. And I got on the train and I handed my phone to my husband. I was like, do not give me that until we get off the train. Because I know that I don't have the willpower. I'm a scroller like everybody. But all around me, eventually I ended up sitting like this because all I could see with everyone else's screens. And I was like, I
Mm,
can't do it. I just need to not have any technology. And that's it. When people kind of go, oh, well, is recruitment easier or harder than when I first started? It's 24/7. I didn't have that. I didn't have a smartphone. We left the
mm,
office, you didn't have a laptop at home. So you worked a long day, you worked hard, but then you were done. Whereas now I just think it's just too much. And we're like, why are people
you're
getting
right.
burnt out? Why are they getting ill? Why are they just kind of going, oh, sod this, I can't be bothered to do this anymore, or I can't physically do it. We're just too overwhelmed with too much everything. We need to do much more slow, but still high performing and making loads of money.
Yeah, that's the catch
It's
22.
a challenge. But it's possible. It is possible to do it.
Yeah. So let's talk about burnout then, because obviously I was explaining to you that recently, and I want to ask you some questions about this as well, because when I see things about burnout and when I hear about people's stories with burnout, typically you hear the extremes, right? You hear people talking about there being hospitalized, and et cetera, et cetera. I I've realized over probably, well, since I got into L&D actually, so probably the last 2.5, nearly 3 years, I've noticed that what happens with me is my brain will just switch off and I don't feel, this is going to sound really weird. I'm trying to explain this. I don't feel anything about certain things. And then I'll go on LinkedIn, for example, and I'll look at what people are doing. And normally I'm like, oh, Michelle has done this, amazing. Or, oh, that person's done that. That's inspiring. When I feel like I'm burnt out, I'm looking at that and I just have no feeling whatsoever. My ambition's just completely dead. And I just feel like I just want to just fall down into a black hole and not exist for a bit until my brain comes back to normal. I don't know what that is. I don't know whether that's just a small part of burnout. I don't know if that's a big part of burnout, but I speak to a lot of people, especially recruitment consultants that are young and maybe don't really necessarily know how to kind of manage their own mindset, their own mental health. But yeah, explain to me maybe what you think that is, and we'll talk about burnout in general.
Yeah. So firstly, that is burnout, but that's probably what would be
Okay.
referred to as habitual rather than chronic. So what you've got is you've got different stages. So you start to go through stress and you get the onset of stress. That's life. We've
Mm,
all got that. And actually a bit of stress is good. It drives us, it pushes us up that performance curve. And then you can get to a bit of chronic stress and you go, that might not be unavoidable. That's just life. If people are busy, they've got families to deal with or sort of whatever. And you're like, you get to that where you go, oh, I might feel a bit physically unwell. So stress kind of makes you physically unwell. Then when you start to go over that point, which is kind of where you get to, that's sort of where the burnout kicks in. That's where we feel emotionally unwell. We feel like there are no emotions. Like stress is we're working too hard, burnout is we can't work. And then you get, if you keep going and you ignore it, so if you started to feel like that and you didn't do the pause, you would keep going and then you'd end up hospitalized. So
okay.
it's being able to notice that difference between, okay, bit of stress, yeah, that's fine. It's end of quarter, realize that I've got some targets to hit. I'm driven, I'm going to put a bit extra in,
Mm,
great. And then you step back a little bit, your body goes back to your adrenaline and your cortisol calms down. Whereas you keep pushing that and you keep going and you're ignoring your body, then eventually that's when you end up. And it is that you stop wanting to socialize, you stop wanting to take care of yourself. You find, and this happens a lot during lockdown, you stop showering. But it
mhm.
is that almost emotional deading where you're like, I don't care. I literally don't care. And that's the difference. And people have got to, when I'm doing my sessions on burnout and I'm talking about the differences, you see the faces in the room being like, oh, I didn't realize that. And it's like, yeah, if you don't grab that now, like burnout is preventable. If you do the right things, you can completely sort of, as much as possible, prevent it. But it's like
Mm,
you've got to know that tripping point when you're like, oh, now I need to step back. And like Novak
yeah.
Djokovic has sort of talked about it quite publicly, and he got to that point where he just had to step back. Simone Biles, she just went,
Mhm.
no, take the time out. And you don't have to kind of just stop all your career, but recognize what's going on by just checking in. What's your body telling you? "Oh, I feel a
Yeah.
bit funny today." And then suddenly you're like, oh God, I actually don't want to see my mates if you're normally very
Mm.
sociable, or don't want to go to the gym if you normally love going to the gym, or you suddenly don't want to pick the phone up and do a BD call when usually you love that. That's probably a sign that you're starting to push a bit too much.
Honestly, I feel like you and I having this conversation today is like the perfect timing because honestly, before this, I was actually in my mind, this is how things have been for me the last 2 days. I was hoping you were going to say, I'm so sorry, can we reschedule? Right? I was supposed to make calls today. I was supposed to do loads. I just couldn't do it. And I didn't know why. And like I said, it's because I thought, and I think a lot of people take value from what I'm saying, I thought that burnout was way more extreme. But if I look back into my career, and I'm sure a lot of people would have had this as well, where I felt burnt out and I was like, I don't want to make that BD call, and I don't really feel myself, but I've got a target to hit. I've still got bills to pay, or I'm saving for a mortgage. So I used to push myself. And then there was a couple of moments in my career where people would always say, like, Charles, you're always ill. You're always sick. What's
Yes,
going on with you? And I had
exactly.
no idea why. And I was always getting a cold. I was always getting tonsillitis. I was always getting these types of problems. And I didn't know why. And it was because it was just pushing through and not being self aware enough to realize, oh my God, you need to just take a break. So, what I've done in the last 2 days, I would say, because I've noticed the trigger for me has been firstly, I ran out of my medication, my ADHD medication, and that's a bit of a trigger. Anyone that's listening to this that has to get medication for ADHD knows it's a nightmare at the moment to try and get it. It's very stressful. GPs are just a nightmare in general as well. And secondly, I've got a puppy, so trying to get sleep and stuff. We woke up at 6 a.m. this morning because we thought he shat the bed. He didn't. He farted. We took him outside, and he had diarrhea at 6 a.m. And it's just like, for fuck's sake. So there were a couple of different things there, whilst obviously doing. I think I said to my wife earlier, I was so overwhelmed with doing everything within the business. And I speak to people, I've got an assistant, I've got a podcast editor, and I'm like, I'm doing fucking everything. And it's just a bit sort of overwhelming. Um, but your advice there, and I think anyone listening, just do the little things and ease your way back into it. Like today, I forced myself to the gym and I just done stuff that I know that I can do. I didn't push too heavy. I just, just to keep the momentum kind of going. I made a really nice, like one of my favorite lunches, healthy but really tasty. Just keeping within that thing, making sure I'm going out and getting sunlight and getting some fresh air regularly. Sorry, just little tiny baby steps rather than completely, like what I said earlier, sinking into that darkness and then trying to then get back onto the bike again and trying to do exercise when you haven't because you've been burnt out is so much more difficult.
Yeah, but what's interesting as well, what you sort of said at the beginning of that about how kind of not necessarily brought up to talk about your feelings. And because of the industry we're in, sort of a large proportion of my clients are men. And
Mm,
most of them will say at one point or another, I've never said this before, or I've never said it sober. I never realized how I was feeling, or, oh, I didn't realize that that's what my wife might be feeling. I get quite a lot of that where men are
mm,
almost kind of using me to understand what it is that is going on with her. Like, why is their wife being really irritable with them? Um, and it is that when you're sort of, you're not all talking about it, then you're not going to know it's happening because it's not common conversation. Or if you're not all talking about it, then you don't know what to look for. Whereas if you were in an office and everyone was aware of what burnout was about, which is why I love doing that session, it means that then you can keep a check out. And if suddenly that really extroverted person in your team is now being a bit quieter, or someone suddenly like develops a bit of a like a rocking or
yeah,
like a crying,
I've
then
seen that.
go and have a chat with them and sort of say, look, should we have a walk around the block? Should we kind of what's going on? Or Sometimes
Mm,
I get the emergency call, which is, Michelle, we're really worried about this person and we don't know
mm,
how to deal with it, or we want them to talk to someone like external and confidential. But it's just like noticing those things, because if we don't pay attention, we'll end up. And I collapsed. I was out twice, and had I have been a sort of part of, I was self-employed at that point. Had I have been a member of a permanent role in a team, that would have cost that company a lot of money. So when
mm.
people kind of go, well, what's the ROI on well-being? And you're just like, let's look at how many sick days. Let's look at people not being able to perform to a high level because they're tired, burnt out. Let's look at people leaving because they can't cope with kind of toxic cultures. You're like, there's plenty of ROI on actually just caring about your staff.
Couldn't agree more with you, Michelle. I can think of a few companies that I've worked for and worked with that the wellness aspect of things and trying to talk about your feelings in the office was kind of like looked down upon. And I think there's such an archaic mindset, especially in 2024, where we're recording this now. You know, you see, like what you said there about Simone Biles, for example, coming out and openly talking about depression and burnout and things like that. But you're right, and I mentioned it in this podcast about being a man, quote, right? And struggling talking about feelings. I think I'm above average in terms of most men. I can talk about my feelings. I've shared things on LinkedIn and stuff like that. But I've still got a lot of work to do. And you know, I've got a lovely wife that I sometimes just don't even tell her I'm feeling stressed, because I feel like in my mind, she can't see me stressed because I'm supposed to be the man of the house. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So
Yeah.
what advice do you have for business owners then, like recruitment leaders that, let's just say, aren't very good about talking about their open feelings, or even just things like stress and burnout? What's your advice to those people to, I guess, communicate it to the wider business and have that sort of conversation?
I think it's firstly having someone that you feel comfortable to talk to. And that might be that it's your partner, or in your case, and in many people's cases, we don't necessarily want to put that onto our other halves. Whether that's a good friend, whether that's a colleague, someone. And if you haven't got someone, there are lots of professionals out there, obviously, sort of myself. But beyond that, there are lots of different coaches or therapists or mentors or different type of networks that you can become part of, so that you're surrounded by people. There are sort of men's groups and women's groups that are kind of going on. I set up a women's group when I moved to Shoreham because I didn't know anyone. It's got 1,600 members. And that's all
Blimey.
women that are kind of going, hey, I actually could just do with some new friends. Um, so the most important thing is have someone to talk to understand that what you're going through doesn't make you weird, doesn't mean that you're going to fail and you should give up recruitment. Because I think there's that, isn't it? Let's not say I'm stressed because someone will think that I shouldn't do recruitment. You're like, not at all. Let's just work out how to manage it, give you the tools to manage it, because then you come back and you're going to come back better. So I do think that's definitely, particularly not stereotyping, but with men, women do tend to get together, have a coffee, have a little chat, have a little rant about who's annoyed them, and then they've got it over and they're fine. Whereas men
Mm,
hold on to it. And particularly when I'm working with sole founders, they don't even have a co-founder to, like you're saying in your business, like
mm,
no one to buddy that off. And am I making the right decision? Those pressures. And if you are then the sole breadwinner, and suddenly there's mortgages or people who are sending their kids to private schools and all of these pressures, these responsibilities, and you don't necessarily want to admit that you feel like you're failing. And it's like, you're not failing, you're just dealing with life. So yeah, for anyone listening, find someone to talk to, because it is so nice. um Go out for a walk with someone. Like, there are so many different ways to meet people if you're kind of thinking you haven't got someone that you feel comfortable to talk to. But just, I think the big thing with anything physical, mental, emotional health is don't wait. Because if you wait and you don't do anything about it, eventually your body will catch up and do it for you. So catch it before it's too, sort of, it's gone too far and it's a lot more difficult to kind of climb back out of the pit, really.
It's honestly, everything you've just said is so important. And I think, unfortunately, in our industry, people overlook things like stress, burnout, physical and mental health. And like you just said, if you don't address it and you think, no, I've got to be working out, you know, I've got targets to hit, etc., then unfortunately it's going to be a huge domino effect, and then you're going to be hospitalized, or you're going to have, like, what I had, tonsillitis. I wasn't hospitalized, but I was in the office and I was not barely able to make phone calls because my fucking tonsils was super swollen and stuff like that. If I just had someone to speak to, and a culture of a business that was like, mate, you've not taken any annual leave and we're now in September, you need to take some time off. Are you feeling okay? I know you've got a big target. I know you're working hard. Like, I didn't really have that. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, work in businesses that don't have those foundations. And obviously, look, I'm a coach, you're a coach, right? We're always going to scream about the ROI and scream about how beneficial it is. But for business owners that want to be high performing and want to have big teams and generate big numbers, you really have to look after people and create a culture where people feel like they can talk about things. But equally, and this is where it's ever so slight catch-22, you don't want to create a culture of people that are like, oh, I'm stressed, I need to take an hour off. I feel like I'm burnt out. I've worked really hard for 2 days. I'm going to go and take some annual leave. There's being adult about it, right? There's a healthy middle ground, I would say.
Yeah, and one thing I don't know for anyone who's seen it is the box set Billions. I hadn't watched it until someone said to me once, "Oh, you're our Wendy," and I didn't know what that meant. And I went and watched it, and Wendy is the performance coach at a hedge fund in this box set. And I think what I really like is it shows that exactly that it isn't about kind of just going, "Oh, well, we should just lie around on cushions all day and kind
Mm.
of cuddle and just like it's not about that. This is about being high performing, achieving what you want to achieve, making the money you want to make, moving and opening the office where you want to open it, and all of that stuff. But to be able to do that, you've got to make sure that you are physically and mentally capable of doing it. So it's about preparing the people to do it so that they can achieve those things. And I think sometimes my job is to say to someone, "Can you? Is that a fact or is that an excuse?" And they're like, "It's an excuse." I'm like, "Okay, good. I'm glad we know that." Um, and someone then going, "Yeah, okay, off. I'm going to go and get on with whatever I need to do." Sometimes it's about having an emotional conversation about some trauma that has happened in the past that they've never spoken about. So, and I think it may be that you've got someone brilliant in HR, or you've got your mental health first aiders, all of those things absolutely brilliant. But also, HR are really busy running sort of their part of the business. The leaders are very busy running the businesses. Um, so just making sure that if you are using your team as mental health first aiders, that you're giving them the support, because otherwise they're taking everybody's weight of sort of what's going on, and who are they then talking to about it? So yeah, it's just creating that psychological safety, but also not saying we've got to go soft on people. And I do think that there is that balance. But if you're inspiring as a leader, then you can push people whilst protecting them. And you can do, we were talking about the drinking earlier. You can do team sports days that sort of don't have to involve drinking, but oh, look, we're doing some exercise. You can do, like, companies have yoga teachers that come in, and or companies have like, oh, let's go on a cooking course together and learn how. Like, there's lots of ways of building team culture that is going to be healthy from a, it's not just about the drink perspective, but also showing people the things that they can do to then help them perform better at work.
Yeah. We had this argument so often in my old company, and to be fair, most recruitment businesses I've worked at that have had those incentives, like those end of month or end of quarter sort of wrap up type of thing. And I remember sitting down with like finance people or operations managers or even just the MD and saying, look, there are so many different things we can do that isn't just putting a credit card behind a bar. And largely, if you're thinking about it from a financial perspective, let's just say, for example, the company has maybe broken even that quarter or that month, and they don't really want to go out and splash out at a crazy venue. Sports day, for example, that type of thing, cooking classes or whatever. Like, there are so many things that don't actually cost that much money. But before we wrap up, the last thing that I did want to speak to you about was exactly that. I think that a lot of recruitment consultants, they love the lifestyle, especially in the city, going out, getting drunk, and then one thing leads to another and all the rest of it. But we've just had a massive conversation around preventing burnout and creating healthy habits and stuff. I like a good drink, right? I've thought about maybe going sober, but then I've never had a problem with drinking, right? I had a bit of a problem-ish with smoking weed in the past, and you and I have spoken about this. I don't really smoke very often, if anything, at all anymore, because it just doesn't really agree with me anymore. My vice, unfortunately, like you, made me feel super embarrassed with it was vaping, right? So anyway, um, yeah, I just wanted to have a bit of a conversation with you really about that, because it's a topic I don't think we speak about enough. Is the booze culture and the drug culture as well in recruitment. And I think some people would just be like, shh, Charles, don't speak about it. Because I know some people just fucking love it. I get it. But you're unfortunately having young recruiters. I've seen recruiters 18 years old going out, sinking loads of pints, then getting on it, and then they're just absolutely useless for the following week. But then they repeat the cycle, and we spoke about habits, and they have that habit now. And I've seen people get fired, Michelle, and it breaks my heart. I still keep in touch with people, and I'm like, you've got so much talent, but you've been roped into this culture of drinking and then doing the drugs and then just not being able to function. So yeah, genuinely, like, it really, really upsets me even thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a really hard one, isn't it? Because people may go out with good intentions, but often it's sort of you have the few pints, and then it's like, oh, okay, now there's sort of let's sort of delve into the drug side. It's not necessarily they're going to the drugs first. So
Mm,
then, when I'm working with people who want to make those changes, you're kind of going, well, like how many pints can you have before you then decide you're going to have the drugs? Is it that you kind of just need to limit yourself to 3 pints? Is it that you've got the right friends? So there's some people I've worked with that, to be honest, it's their mates, and their mates are not necessarily kind of good for them. So don't see your mate in a nighttime thing. If you want to see that mate, go for like a breakfast or a brunch or whatever it might be. But it is really hard. And again, that sort of when it's very much in the culture and expected that everyone's going to do it, and then you're bringing young people in and potentially sort of providing them with it so it's not costing them anything. I think that takes a really strong person to say no. And I sort of have never done it. I just knew I could afford to have a really bad habit, so I never did it. And there would be times when we'd be out socializing and I'd literally be like, I'm just here on my own, because everyone would be
yeah.
sort of off in the toilet. Um, and that took a lot for me to kind of go, no, I'm not going to go down that route. So I think that by creating socials that aren't just about going to the pub, but then if you're building a culture of that well-being is part of it. I know there's some recruitment businesses and they're doing like running challenges together or gym
Mm,
challenges, or they're very much talking about the wellness bit. So it's not just the drink and the drugs, but it's like there are other ways to live your life within it. I think it is also the reality, being a realist, isn't it? Sort of, I never tell people not to do things because no one would ever want to be coached by me if I was just saying that. But what I do is go, how much good stuff can we put in that means you just have less time for the bad? So let's put in sort of some exercise. Let's put in kind of going for a walk with a mate at lunchtime. Let's put in that an evening you might go and I don't know, go and do a pottery class, I don't know, random. But put some good stuff in, and then eventually there's just not as much space for the bad stuff. So I think it is something that there needs to definitely be more of awareness. And I think that sadly, it is still an issue that's out there. I'd like to think that we could just sort of wave a magic wand, but when there's an industry that's high stress and sort of high earning potential, it does sort of come with that. So it's like, how do we manage that, and
mm,
how do we make sure that it's not every night? So a bit like you're sort of with the drinking, you want to go out every now and then and you want to have a good booze up. Fine. I enjoy that as much as sort of the next person. Do I do it every night? No. Why?
mm.
Because I wouldn't look great as a health coach to turn up hungover. But also I like to exercise in the morning. So I'm making that choice. If I go out and have a drink, then I can't probably exercise as much the next morning. So, but it is a really difficult one because also it is about
Mm.
being realistic and supporting people with the choices that they're making to do things in the healthiest way that they can.
Yeah. Do you know what? You just kind of reminded me of something. I worked with a recruiter that had all the talent in the world, and everyone knew that this person was going to be like a top biller, but they were just basically performing incredibly averagely. And it turned out that they were going out all the time and getting on it, and then going and staying around somebody else, a colleague's house until 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and then getting back into the office for 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning the next day. But when I really, and as a coach, you've got to really dig into reasons why they're doing the job and all the rest of it. It turns out they wanted to buy a house, like a lot of young recruiters, and they wanted to help their mum out, and they wanted to be that role model in the family. And we figured out how much money he could save by not doing that. And when we actually broke down how they were feeling in the office when not having the sleep and not eating correctly and all the rest of it, you just saw that metaphorical light bulb above their head going, oh my God, yes, I'm having the time of my life, but it's ruining my life at the same time. And as soon as they stopped and they started to knuckle down, and people were like, oh, you're going to come out? And they're like, no, I'm just going to stay here actually. And I'm seeing my girlfriend, or I'm seeing some families. So they're like, oh, okay, sound. All of a sudden, he was just outperforming everybody. And it's because he took control of the alcohol, the drugs, the diet, the sleep, hanging around with the right types of people, everything you've just said there. Honestly, Michelle, I think this has been fantastic. I feel like there's been so much value that I feel like since doing this, I come away from things learning so much myself as well. So it's been really, really good. But the last question I'd like to wrap up the show with is, following today's show, how can people become 1% better in recruitment?
Always such an interesting one, because I was thinking about it and it's like, oh, the 1%. I bang on about this all the time. So I'm going to go there again. Breathwork. Like, yeah, we could talk about sort of doing the dials and making sure, sort of like doing a trial close and all of that. But let me leave that to the sort of the recruitment training experts. I think that if someone is struggling with sleep, if they are struggling with stress, anxiety, if they can't think straight, if their memory's not good, if they're getting sick a lot, like literally a long, long list of things that someone could be struggling with. The one thing that you can do, sat at your desk, that no one even has to know you're doing, that doesn't cost you anything, is to focus on your breathing. And this isn't woo woo, this is all science. Andrew Huberman from Huberman Labs talks about it all the time. He focuses on long exhales. So, literally, if you breathe in for a count of 4 and then you breathe out for a count of 8, you do that 2-3 times, you're going to feel calmer. So if you are sitting there and you're about to go and like pitch to a new client, do a bit of breathing, set yourself up for it. You come off the call because a candidate's now taking a counter offer and you're ready to just ruin your whole day being angry. Do some breathing. You will then go, that is annoying, but I've done everything that I could. And now I'm going to just pick the phone up and find another candidate. So if you want to be better in recruitment and you want to make more money, we've got to make the most of all the time that we have. You want to be sleeping better. Breathing helps you with that. You want to think better. Breathing helps with that. Like, it's just, but sad, until people experience it, they don't realize how powerful it is. And every time that I run through a session with someone, or I run through it with a group, you just see that, like, oh my God. And you know what? If you do it well, it's as good as taking drugs. So you could not do the drugs, you can do breath work, it's free, you can do it anywhere, and it's not going to impact your health. So look, win-win. There's my summary. There's your sound bite. Don't do drugs, do breath work.
I love how that was perfectly in line with our last conversation. I don't know if you planned that, but that was absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. Well
It
bloody
is.
said.
People kind of go, oh, I feel quite mellow. I said, do you feel a bit stoned? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, there you go. Or they're like, God, I feel like I've got loads of energy. I'm like, yeah, there we go. So it's like, there's so many different types, but literally just start with a 4 in and an 8 out and watch the difference.
Love it. Have you ever used an app called Luminate before?
No, I haven't. What's that?
You'll love it. So you can do like a 7-day free trial, and I think for a lot of recruiters that want to have that experience, it's very worth it. It's free. And yeah, basically what it does is you put your phone next to your face, like 7 inches away from your face, and it uses the flashlight to do like a frequency, so it will flash certain amounts. And when you close your eyes, basically something happens with when your eyelids are shut. The way that the light goes through your eyelids, it creates kind of like psychedelic patterns, so that you'll have like a guided meditation, and it uses binaural beats as well. So your brain waves will go on a certain type of wavelength to put you into a calm state. And because, as you know, I've been doing breath work for years, as of recently, guess what? Not enough. Hence why I feel like shit. So thank you for reminding me. But yeah, I would sit there and I would do either the Wim Hof breathing method, or I would do the box breathing, or the slow exhales, or whatever. And you essentially just trip out for 10 minutes and wake up, and there is no side effects. There's no psychological nonsense. It is just pure zen, calm, ready to go. Can't say you can do that at your desk. You look really, really weird. And also, you need to be in a dark room to do it. But before bed, it is fucking phenomenal. And I'm going to do that tonight before I go to bed because I think I need it.
Well, I'm going to the Big Data London conference next week. I'm there for 2 days and I'm doing breathwork sessions. So I am
Love it.
bringing breathwork to the techies. It's going to be hilarious. I'm going to have them floating out of their seats. So, but it's like you got to try it. When you've tried it, you realize it. People go to meditation. Meditation is a really hard place to start because trying to switch off your thinking when you've got a lot going on is almost impossible. Start with breath work. It's science. It's inhale, it's exhale. And you will just, you'll notice. Go and have a look. There's actually a guy on my LinkedIn recommendations. He's got ADHD and I introduced him to breath work and he was like, oh my God, this is a game changer. So for anyone neurodiverse, absolutely check out breathwork.
Love it. Michelle, thank you so much. It's been awesome. I'm very confident that people will take a tremendous amount of value from this. So before we wrap it up, obviously people might want to reach out to you. What's the best way to reach out to you and all that type of stuff?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm all over that. I'm often posting videos and stuff, so you can contact me through that. My website is michelleflynncoaching.com. I do one-to-one coaching. I do group workshops. I do big public speaking gigs, which I love as well. So, and to me, like health and performance, they are all completely interlinked. So sometimes people are like, oh, health is just food and exercise. And you're like, no, your work affects your health. Your relationships affect your health. Your connection to yourself affects your health. So sort of any of what we've talked about today has just kind of like piqued your interest, or sounds like there's some familiar things going on, or if actually you've just got some questions and you'd like a podcast recommendation on something, drop me a note. I'm more than happy to answer all of those questions. But yeah, just spreading the kind of, we can be high performing and we can be healthy. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Love it. Michelle, again, thank you very much.
You are welcome. Bye.